So this is the DS Incubator, so thanks for joining. And again, we are talking about the book, What They Forgot to Teach You About R. The first, I think it was 2 or 3 meetups, were about holistic workflow, which is probably the minimum that we should all know to work effectively together. And this is a meetup about installing our packages. It belongs to the section of the book named, I think it's called Personal R Admin. But I wanted to focus on the things that we, in 2 degrees, we deal with more often, also inspired by some of the conversations that we have had in help desks or generally. So I wanted to use that experience to cherry pick basically the content for this series, for this meetup. Not sure if I'm going to cover everything today. I don't think so actually, but the general idea is to talk about where the packages come from and where they go to. It sounds very simple, but it's not. It's a lot more complex than it seems. But I think revealing some of those mysteries could help basically ourselves debug some of the issues that sometimes we encounter when we install packages. So this is more a meetup that impacts on your own our happiness, as opposed to the previous meetups that were more about collaborating with others. But it does happen that someone tells you, hey, install a package from CRAN or install a package from GitHub, and then you struggle. So then in a way it also impacts the ability that you have to collaborate with others. So the objectives of today are the following. So to try and understand what are the default behaviors of installed packages, there is basically 3 arguments. The first 3 that are key, then there is a bunch more, but we're gonna be focusing on those 3. One that tells you which packages you want to install, the other one that tells you where to put those packages, and the other one that tells you where to bring them from. So basically the focus of today's meetup is covered by those 3 arguments. So once we understand the defaults, we are going to be, a second objective is to try control those defaults so that we set things up persistently in a way that we like, or even to, for example, install packages from different repositories that are not the ones that comes out of the box. Also, we're going to be covering the idea of installing packages from GitHub, because we do have a bunch of packages that come from there at 2 degrees, both private and public repositories. And then an item that I don't think we're going to have time to cover today is the idea of controlling where the packages go. So where they go by default, but also how to set up, for example, a temporary location so that you can test the package without touching your system at all, and then throw it away. Go ahead, Faria. You posted a message. So useful. Sorry, I missed that message. Would you like to say it?
Oh, no, I was just saying that it's useful if you're like me and you corrupt your library of packages, and then you have to go to Maro for help.
Indeed, it happens that sometimes we're gonna try also kind of demystify what it is, this idea of a library. So basically it's just a directory where there's a bunch of subdirectories. Each subdirectory belongs to a package, and if one of those is corrupt for whatever reason, sometimes you just cannot use other packages as well, so you're kind of stuck. So understanding where to look for trouble and solutions is important. Okay, so let's go ahead. As usual, in every series, that there is a repository associated to the series. This one is called ds.whattheyforgot, WTF, and each folder belongs to roughly to a meetup. Sometimes we cover the contents of one folder in more than one meetup. Like it's gonna happen most likely today. So to show some of the things that I'm going to be showing today, I'm using an R environment that I got through Docker, so that I can use RStudio basically not in my computer, but indeed, but inside a little computer that Docker gives me. It's not important for this meetup at all, and there is a whole series about Docker. The point is that if you want to reproduce my R environment, you could reproduce it with what it's written here. And I'm gonna be mentioning some of the packages listed here for a few things. So the very first item or objective of today's meetup is this idea of understanding the default of install.packages. So for this, I'm gonna go here to our studio. I'm gonna render this R Markdown file so that I have the output here on my right-hand side. And then maybe I just gonna be using my console here. So I'm gonna clear this console, just making sure that I restart everything. Oh, actually, with that I lost the rendered version of my README file, which is gonna be my guide. So here it is again. So let's play here in the console. So I did restart my session already. So install.packages comes with a bunch of arguments. So you could retrieve the help file with question mark as usual. So I'm gonna be using tab completion here to quickly complete that word or that function name, get the documentation of install.packages. And this is a function that we use all the time, and we rarely stop to kind of read what it does. So I wanted to direct attention to, well, packages is kind of straightforward. So if you want to install the package R2AI data, you would do something like this, right? But then there are other arguments that we usually do not use, like lib, which is the location of the packages once they are installed in your computer, and then the repos argument, which tells where online to look the packages from. So basically repos is from, basically where the packages come from, and lib is where the packages go to inside your computer. So that is not so much of a mystery. If you read the help file, you will see that the arguments are explained here, and in particular note that it says that the default, for example, of lib is the first element of this thing. So what is that thing? Let's run that. So if I do .lib path, and that's a very odd name, so if I run that, you can see how there is basically what looks like paths to directories. So those paths, those directories are what we call libraries, because inside each of those there are packages that one installs. So what it's saying, this help file, is that the first element, in this case this one here, is the one that is used by default if you don't use it explicitly. So I'm gonna show you that actually in my own system. So if I go, this is, it looks the same, but now this is my computer, it's not inside Docker. So in my case here, lib's path is a different thing. Lib path is a different thing than in Docker, as you can see. And the first element, which is the one that is used by default, is one that has my name on it. So it's something that I control as a user of this computer. Compared to this other one, so this is inside Docker. As you can see, there is nothing here that says my name because it's a different computer. So the one that's going to be used is always the first one first, and then if the package is not found there, it's going to fall back to the other places. So one thing I would like to show you is that, okay, if I go to this directory, so again, so one way you can get that directory is with lib's path and then the element 1. So if I run that here on the console, that's exactly what I get. So now I could pass that to browse URL, or you can manually use the your files explorer to go and open a window that takes you to that place. But I find it very convenient to use this R function called browse URL. So with this, what you can see here is something that might look familiar to you. I'm using Linux, so maybe the interface is a little different. But as you can see here, it's just a folder with a bunch of subfolders. And in here, you could see things that may look familiar to you. Like, for example, let's try find dplyr, for example, which is a package that is very, very popular, so you should know. So here is dplyr, right? And there is also the dt package, for example, that makes beautiful tables, for example, and it has its own folder, and so on and so forth. So if I go inside the dplyr folder, then there is a collection of other subfolders and files, including the description file. And if I go to the, if I do the same for, say, the DT package, the same structure applies. So the description file for DT. So what that is telling you is that the packages that are installed in your computer are no more and no less than a bunch of folders and files somewhere inside your computer. And which place in your computer? Well, you now know that you can find that with the function libpaths. And if you are unsure because you forget about what you listened to or you heard today, then you can always do !" install.packages and retrieve the health file, which will give you which will remind you what to look for. So if you go to the argument lib, again, here is what you would be looking for, libpath. And then repos. So where do packages come from? Repos is simply a URL. So it says here, for example, that, for example, the URL of a CRAN mirror could be this one, https cloud.rproject.org, which is kind of the default place. If you type CRAN on Google, it will take you to the comprehensive archive network website. So this URL is what you would feed to the argument repos. So with that information, we can now reproduce in code what we would get if we do install.packages and just the name of a package, but now giving explicit defaults. For example, here in repos, I could use something like, I could do something like, let's go here to my computer instead. So here I could do, sorry, I'm confusing you and I jumping from one place to the other. So let's make this big. So normally we do install.packages, right? And we do something like r2dii data, and that's it. So if we run that, that will try to install packages. So I'm gonna let this run to show you some useful messages that we get actually when we install packages with that function, to try basically relate the information that we read on the health file with the information that we get from the messages after we install the package. So let's wait just for 1 second here. Hopefully my internet is gonna be working well. It's taking surprisingly a long time. I wonder if it's because I'm using resources from the meeting. Well, I'll need to cancel this, unfortunately, because it's taking too long. So my point was that usually we call a package, we install a package with this call, but now we know that we can use the repos argument and then give it something like this, yeah? And then the location of the library, remember we discussed that we could find it out with libpaths, and it is gonna be the first element. So this is my location or my library, my lib, right? So now I could do install packages with the repos argument and also with the argument lib, which is my second argument, lib, let's go with lib, which is the one I defined before. So this call could be doing the exact same thing that my default is doing, except that I'm calling the arguments explicitly. right? So that's to understand the defaults. So now let's move on to, there we go. Let's move on to, okay, so here is the messages that I was attempting to get in the demo. So when you run the function and it successfully runs, you will see a red message, which is not an error. A lot of people think it's some kind of problem, but it's just a message. It's R telling you where the packages are gonna be installed into and where they come from. So the message says install packages into, and then you will see a path. So that's what it's gonna tell you where they're gonna go, and the message saying try URL such and such, is telling you where online the packages are coming from. So with that, we covered the first little bit. So the second section of this meetup is to discuss other repositories other than the one that I show you here, other than CRAN, like the kind of the vanilla one, that might be useful. And the reason why they might be useful is because they allow you to do a few clever things that I'm gonna start discussing in a moment. But before I jump to this, let me go back to your faces here and ask if there is any comment or question up to this point. Okay, nothing, there isn't. I'm gonna go back to the meetup, and I suspect it's because so far we moved very slowly but surely, because it's a very those three arguments of install.packages are very useful, so I want to kind of ensure that we take it slow. So in the demo file that I'm using to guide this meetup, you will see this link that takes us here. Let me see if I can point that to you. So here, where it says, from our Studio Package Manager, you can just click there, and that will take you to this page. Very quickly, this is what this page is all about. So this page allows you to set up a repository different than the vanilla one, where you can get packages that may install a lot faster because they are binary, as opposed to the source code, which needs to then be transformed into a binary version in your computer. Depending on the operating system, if you have Windows or Macs, maybe that's you wouldn't see an advantage here. But if you have Linux, for sure. And then also, which is something that we are not going to be covering today, with this you could also freeze a repository. Basically, what you could be doing is saying, okay, take CRAN as it was on day such and such, and pretend and install all the packages as they were on that specific day. And that is useful if you are running an analysis that might be difficult to reproduce with the latest and greatest versions of the packages as they evolve. So instead, it works today, so you come to this website, you find the date of today, and then you use that specific repository for every time that you have to rerun and reproduce that analysis. So that's pretty clever. So note though that here at the top right, there it says the name of a platform. So in my case, I'm using Ubuntu. So if you're using a different operative system, you have to click here and find instructions for your system, for example, Windows, right? And then the page will update for your operative system. So I'm gonna use Ubuntu.
Mara, we're 20 minutes in.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm going to wrap this up at the end of this section, and then see what questions and comments we have. So I'm going to be using Ubuntu. Ubuntu Focal is called, the one that I'm using. I'm not going to be using a freezed version. I'm going to be using just the latest one because that's what I want. And then I'm going to scroll down all the way to the bottom. There is a few other instructions that I don't need to tell you about. You can do something similar to what I'm going to show you on our studio, but my instructions aim to be more general than that. So you may be using R from a different IDE, or just vanilla R with no GUI at all, with no IDE at all. So at the very end, when it says outside our studio, that is what I want, basically to copy this information here. So what that is an instruction. Remember that we use the argument repos from the function install.packages. So with this line of code, we would set up for the running session the default repository from which to install packages from. So with this, we would be installing packages not from the vanilla CRAN repository, but instead from this one that comes from Package Manager. So where do we put that? As it says here, put it in a file called, for example, our profile or our profile site. So for this presentation, I'm going to be focusing on our profile. And there is two places where you could place that file. So that's the name of the file. It's called our profile. And the best way to edit that file is with the package use this. It has a function called edit our profile. And you can specify an R profile. When I said, there is two places where you can, write that file to. So one is at the user level. So anything that you do here affects your entire system, or at the project level. So in this case, I'm going to be using the project level R profile because I don't want these instructions to accidentally change something that is in your system that you may not want to change. So in that file, I simply paste that string that I copied from the website, from RStudio Package Manager, the instructions, and then I'm gonna end with a new line, an empty new line. Here in line 2, notice that it's empty. I'm gonna save that file. I can close it now if I want. And very important, we have to restart. We have a reminder here on the R console. So now I'm gonna restart R. And now when you ask for, remember we use the function options. So you can use the same function options, and remember that the options that we changed, so actually maybe to remind you that, let me do this one more time. We use this edit our profile. This is what we did. So we set the option repos and we gave it a value. So what we can do to retrieve that value is again use the function options and now just inside quotation marks call the name of the option that we are modifying, repos in this case, right? So that's one way to retrieve the value. So now you can see how the URL here has changed, and that will automatically update the default of the function install.packages. So now we have set the default of install.packages to use packages not from anywhere else, but from this specific package repository, which, as I said, is convenient for speed sometimes, and also for reproducibility if you want to freeze your package repository in one point in time. Okay, so let me go back to you all. I'm gonna run this to have a reminder of what's gonna be the next thing that we want to cover. But after doing that, yes, let me go back to you. Okay, so some comments or questions up to here. We still have 6 more minutes to go. Go for it, yeah.
So just I wanted to confirm that you can. Oops, sorry, my camera. So you can create a directory, and then have your lib paths be pointed to that directory, right? Is there a way to do that through the package install packages option, or is that something you have to set from before?
Yes, as you suggest, there is more than one way to specify things. So the function has arguments that you can modify explicitly. So you could set, so the question that you are asking now refers not so much to the repos argument, but refers to the lib argument of install.packages, which specifies where the packages go. And that's gonna be, we're gonna talk about that in detail in another meetup, but briefly, certainly you can specify it at the level of the function call. So when you call install.packages, you can say for that specific call to install packages, where those packages go. But as Faria is suggesting, you can also set that at the general level. And how you do that? Well, you do that with So you do that with another trick that you can also set in the art profile that I mentioned just before, but it's quite complex and kind of deserves at least half of a meetup at least. So if you, Faria, in particular, I would like to set a custom destination for your packages like now, I encourage you to kind of contact me after the meetup and we figure that out, because if you're not rushed, then it should be covered the next time we talk about installing packages.
Thank you.
But certainly, as you said, the gist is this. So you can do it when you call install the packages at the level of that single function call just for that time, or you can do it more persistently. And you can even do it at a temporary level, so that you try a new package, and then when you've closed this, when you restart R, that package is gone. So that's one thing we're gonna be talking about too. Any other comment or question? Okay, I would like to move to CJ, go ahead.
Never mind. I thought you didn't have something to do too, but go ahead.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'd like to at least set the ground for what's coming next. Not sure if I'm going to have time to cover much, but at least, most of us, I think we are familiar with GitHub. GitHub is a place where you can host pretty much any text file, including the source of our packages. So R has developed a way to install package directly from GitHub, so that's why I wanted to cover that here. It has to be here. Installing a package from GitHub from a repository that is public is no problem. Like doing something like this, the R2AI data package exists on CRAN, so you could install it with install.packages, but it also exists on GitHub. So if you're interested in the latest and greatest changes to that package without waiting for the next release of that package on CRAN, then you could install it from its source code on GitHub with this function, right? So once that you install DevTools, which is a package that lives on CRAN, then you can call the function install_GitHub from the package DevTools with the address of that package on GitHub, right? With 2 degrees investing / to R2AI data. So that will be no problem. But if you try to install a private package, so this one here, for example, is a private package, you should, unless you have access to that repository because you have privileges that someone gave to you and you have set up what's called a GitHub token, only then you can install packages. If you don't have those privileges or you don't have a GitHub token, then that should fail. So let me show you. Let me get out of my own computer and go to here to this other instance of RStudio that is running inside the Docker container. So this Docker container, I believe, is not privileged to install packages from our private repositories. So if I run that, if that takes a short time, what I would like to do is to show you the error message that appears when this fails, because it's a little cryptic and it may. So this is something that has happened recently with people from the Pastax team. They wanted to install that package. I did give them permission to access the repository, so they could navigate to the repo and look at it. But then when they called the function install_GitHub, it just failed. Okay, so this is again taking a long time, and honestly, I'm not very sure why. But there you go. Timeout. No, I think the error is different. It's not the one I wanted to show you. Well, it does say unknown package, but there is something else that I wanted to show. The message does say something about that you may not have permission to access this package. So that will be the focus of the very first part of next meetup then, because it's super important, because we know in our team we do work with private packages, and setting up the GitHub token is not super straightforward. So if you are rushed to do that, contact me and I can point you to the links to do it. But if you don't, then just wait. So here in the document that I'm following, it does have the gist of it. So you can go to this URL and read on, or you can run the function gh token help, and that function will guide you to run these other three functions, or these other two functions actually, because the last one is to confirm, that will eventually help you first to create the token on GitHub, and then to use that token locally to set things up, so that next time that you call the function, it will work. But it will work only if you specify this secret. So this is a bit complex and super important because we do use private packages. So I'm gonna go back to this next time that we meet. So for now, that's the end of today's meetup because we ran out of time, but not before I ask you if there is any departing comment or question. Okay, good. All right, so sorry for those who know this by heart because you're very familiar with this, many of us. Mostly this is a very important record for those who struggle installing packages and we need somewhere to point them to. So thanks for sticking. Ciao, ciao.